Hey everyone, it's Hannah with Meadow Blossom Goods, and we're just going to have a little chat that's all 18th century laundry starches and like finishing stuff. Since I just did that really awesome cap for Alicia, which I have here to kind of feel like you'll be able to see like the body that it has since it's been starched now that like I'm holding it instead of in a still picture. So, what I did for this cap is I used our new Poland starch, which will be up in the shop, or might be up in the shop already by the time I get this posted. And I also used our 1884 original bluing. And I'm going to a lot of our products are dated with later time periods because the further into time you get, the more like documented everything is. Everything in all of my 18th century research is kind of vague, which is okay. I mean, you can kind of fill in the blanks as you go. But that being said, just about the only place I run into our Poland starch, which I have here, about the only place I run into this name mentioned is in 18th century stuff and really early 19th century. And I'm not really sure why this one went out of fashion or why its name went out of fashion. Basically, what Poland starch is it's a specific type of like species derived starch, but it's processed a specific way. So for example, you would have just like plain wheat starch, and then you would have a better quality, better processed wheat starch, which would be called something else. So the Poland starch is kind of a very popular example of that. And as you're doing research, you might run into Poland starch for laundry use. I think they use it a lot in cosmetics as well, just because it was such a high quality starch. That being said, there were a lot of people who were marketing things as, hey, we have Poland starch, but it wasn't actually Poland starch per how it was supposed to be manufactured, which is kind of what we have here, because as I've been able to find so far, Poland starch as it was made in the 18th century, I haven't found anything that's being made like that yet. But, so we have like our knockoff Poland starch, but I think given how this cap turned out, the results are pretty amazing. So Poland starch is kind of our only like 18th century specific starch. So this one you run into a lot as like lots of merchants were selling it. However, if you are doing more of a working impression or a common folk, there's two other starches I have that will work well for you as well. Lots of women were making different kinds of potato starches in their own homes. And potato starch is the base for the Blossom common starch and also the Blossom common starch gloss. So both of these would be suitable for 18th century starching needs as well. Now, if you're just starching, that's awesome. It's a great place to start. But there's a lot of other things you can be doing with your garments as well. So I have some of those things here to kind of talk about too. The publication that I was looking at that talked about laundry starches in the 18th century was kind of talking about lots of, laundresses like to use this list of products, but don't do that. Okay, so you know that publication is advising you not to, but then you also know that since they're advising you not to, that people are out there doing what that publication doesn't want you to do. But I carry a lot of those products in my Etsy shop as well. So to avoid confusion, I kind of go with the 19th century terminologies for this kind of stuff. So the Poland starch is a straight starch, and the Blossom common starch is a straight starch, and the Blossom gloss has an additive in it. which they did have in the 18th century. By the 19th century, they're referring to that as a gloss. So that would be all of your boraxes and alums and stuff like that is what makes it a gloss. In the 18th century, they lump everything that I'm calling a gloss and a polish all into the same category. And then a few other things too. Like anything that they would add to starch all got dumped into one category. But again, to avoid confusion, in my shop, I kind of break them down into the 19th century terminologies because there's just so much going on terminology-wise. Okay, so the gloss starch, totally suitable even though it does have those additives in. And this one actually uses salt as its additive, which is one of the cheapest things that women would have been using at that time. But like alum and borax and things like that were things that they were also using too. They also talk about adding what I call polishes to their starches, and polishes are fats or waxes that get melted into your clear starch as like at the very, very end of cooking. And I carry 2 of them that would be suitable for 18th century work, and these are kind of hard to see in the video. So this one is actually a little rose shape, and the roses are made of lard, like pig fat, rendered pig fat. I have cut them with a little teeny bit of white wax just because lard has such a low melting point that it would never ever stay in this pre-measured form if I didn't kind of blend it with something else. But they did use a little bit of white wax. White wax gets to be a little more popular in the 19th century than in the 18th, but it's still something that would have been available to them. So this one is lard, and then I have this other one here. This one, you can't really see it in the video. This one is kind of shaped like a cameo. And this one is made of tallow. Mine is beef tallow. They did also use like mutton tallow and other different kinds of fats that were available to them too. Tallow has a little bit of a higher melting point, so it's not going to be as gooey as the lard. I personally think that the lard is a little bit easier to work with in starching because of the low melting point. So they kind of both have their fine points. So yeah, the tallow and lard polished blossoms, I call them in the shop, would be appropriate to add to your starch powders as you are getting ready to starch any 18th century garments you might have. Another additive that they do talk about adding is gum arabic. I sell this in, and I have it dated 1863. That is when I start to read about it a lot. Like, it was really popular during that time period and post-war as well. So it did exist in the 18th century. Some people were using it. It just wasn't as popular. This as a starching additive or just by itself has some pretty cool capabilities. This would be perfect for anyone who needs to finish some beautiful pinked edges. This is really good to kind of add a little bit of gloss to your starch powders. Gum arabic is recommended for silk or velvet or things like that. Again, it's very good for kind of gluing those frayed edges together to keep them from fraying further, and for finishing nice pinked edges as well too. So this is like I said, it's dated 1863, but that's when it starts to get really popular, but it was used in the 18th century as well. And last but not least, I have our original 1884 bluing. So the thing that bluing is tough. There's a lot of different kinds of like chemical makeups that make the color blue, and a lot of them are pretty complicated and require a little more chemistry than the average person is inclined to be using. This bluing, I got the recipe out of an 1884 book, and it uses what they call Prussian blue to make the color blue. Prussian blue is not water soluble, so you're liable to get little white specks, or not white, little blue specks here and there, as it's not going to dissolve as nicely as some of the other bluings. But this is the one I think you see run into the most because I think it's cheaper and it's just more readily available. So the 18th century books I have call for powder blue. This would be powder blue. I have already mixed it into a liquid form, and you see it does separate, not water soluble at all. But when you shake it up, you get a nice blue, dark blue color. So you add just a little teeny tiny bit of that to your starching water, just enough to make it the faintest blue, and you're going to want to make sure that you agitate your mixture a lot to kind of avoid those specks. I did blue this beautiful little cap here, and it's 1,000 times whiter than it was when I first got it, but I have some teeny tiny, let's see if I can get it so you can see it on the camera decent. There are some teeny specks on here. It's hard to, oh, see, you can see there's a little speck up here where my index finger is, up there. You can see the little speck. And there are a couple of those throughout the cap, but for the most part, you have a really beautiful, crisp white cap. And while the blue specks aren't something you want, I think that they were probably a lot more common than we like to think. In some of the later books that I have, it talks a lot about how to avoid that. Instructions, it's like troubleshooting your laundry routine, things you might, problems you might run into, and having blue speckled garments is one of those things in their troubleshooting. So it's a problem that our ancestors would have had as well. So if you get blue specks, don't feel bad. Practice makes perfect, and the advantage of bluings is that they kind of wash out over time. So even though that you have blue specks, the next time or two you wash that garment, it's gonna be gone. Bluing is not something that's permanent. You just kind of need to keep up with it every time you wash. So when I did this cap, I followed kind of some 18th century instructions that I had from one of the publications I was looking at, and it said how to mix the starch, and for the most part, mixing starch recipes hasn't changed a lot. Even the measurements are pretty much the same. So I mix the starch like I always do, and like the directions on the back of all my tins say, and I added that bluing directly to my starching mixture, diluted it with water, and proceeded to starch my cap. The cool thing that I tried with this cap, usually in the modern world, I kind of hang out my stuff to dry, and I walk away and I forget about it, and I come back and it's dry, and I iron it and go on with my day. This is a light enough fabric that I was actually able to iron it while it was still damp. I washed it, I laid it out to dry, I came back like an hour and a half later, and I started ironing it. And that is the biggest difference. It's incredible what a difference just that simple fact makes. Even on my sample pieces, it made a huge difference. Smoothing out the wrinkles, getting that nice glossy finish that you're looking for. This cap is really a testament to how that stuff kind of turns out. So, if you have any questions, feel free to contact me via Facebook or Instagram, or, however you want to get in contact with me. But that is kind of 18th century laundry extras in a nutshell. So again, I'm Hannah with Meadow Blossom Goods. Check me out on Facebook at Meadow Blossom Goods. Instagram, # Meadow Blossom Goods. I have a YouTube channel also, so you can look me up on there. And my Etsy shop, where you can get all of these cool things that we just looked at. You can check that out at www.meadowblossomgoods.etsy.com. Have a wonderful day. It is a beautiful one.